Jacqueline Murray, an historical commissioner for the town of Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And if you're like most people, you might think that historical commissioner and Cherry Hill are a contradiction in terms. Living in what is for most residents a new area, the historic preservation of town is a subject that the majority of people never really think about. And that's something we hope will change. The past 40 years have altered Cherry Hill dramatically. So before it changes further, the commission decided to produce this video just to show people how it is we got to where we are now. However, there are some people in the township who have dedicated their lives to the saving of historic sites. And to them, we offer a heartfelt thanks and hope that you'll join them in their fight, because without their hard work, there would be very little of historical significance left in Cherry Hill. The following is a series of interviews intended to shed some light on how it is Cherry Hill exists the way it does today. It's the making of a township, so to speak, told to us by those who knew us when. Whenever the name Cherry Hill, New Jersey is mentioned, people are most likely going to think of our mall, and that is, at least in part, correct. The thriving Cherry Hill Mall was the successful prototype of enclosed shopping malls, and it spawned a trend that has changed the way Americans have done their shopping for the latter half of the 20th century. Cherry Hill, or as it was then called, Delaware Township, may have started out as a bucolic, even sleepy escape from Philadelphia. But that changed, and changed rapidly. How and why did Delaware Township, consisting of little villages named Colestown, Ellisburg, Uxbridge, and Earlton, finally consolidate into the one cohesive suburban unit we now know as Cherry Hill? To find the answers, the Cherry Hill Historical Commission went to those who made the decisions that changed us from a rural farming community to the dynamic, competitive place we live in today: the Delaware Township and Cherry Hill mayors. We chose to meet with our mayors at the Barclay Farmstead, a refurbished late 18th century building preserved by the township. Earl W. Mooney, the first mayor of Delaware Township, in office from 1949 through 51, died in 1988. So our oral history begins with Christian Weber, Republican Party-backed mayor, who was first elected in 1951. It was during that decade when it all began to change here. Weber told me his first election was a hotly contested race with about 1,800 votes cast. Having an affable personality, he was a natural for the job, collecting memories from his very first night as the newly elected mayor.
We celebrated.
How many votes did you win by?
Around 400 or 500 back in those days.
How many votes were cast?
I'd say at the most 1,800.
Why do you think you won? What do you think voters responded to?
I think that people were unhappy with the people who were running the township then.
And what were some of the issues that you think made them unhappy?
Some of the issues were, of all things, trash pickup.
During his tenure, it became evident that the easygoing confederacy of towns lumped together forming Delaware Township was an idea whose time had definitely gone.
We had 5 post offices in Delaware Township, and the mail was delivered 2 or 3 days late everywhere.
Why was Cherry Hill chosen as the name?
Because of the mansion that was originally there across from Sinelli's and across from the shopping center.
Did you have a lot of unhappy people when you chose?
Yeah, there were different names. We had a contest where the people decided what name they would like best, and we got all kinds of names. Yeah, Backward Town, Forward Town.
Those favoring Forward Town were on the right track. In the 50s, industry was beginning to move to Delaware Township, starting a trend that was to continue. What major construction projects did you oversee, or what industry came into Cherry Hill while you were mayor?
RCA, the shopping center, the Courier Post.
Were you happy or unhappy with how?
I'm glad to get them.
Why?
Because they were good ratables.
Those building projects were to change the way people and industry looked at Delaware Township forever. In 1954, the Cherry Hill Inn opened at Haddonfield Road and Route 38. The name Cherry Hill was chosen because the inn stood on the site of the pre-revolutionary Cherry Hill Farm. Today, looking down from the inn, we see part of the busy network of roads servicing the township. But during the Revolutionary War, the farm served as a lookout post for the colonial cause, where British troop movement could be monitored. Then, in May of 1955, RCA opened a large division next to the inn and named it RCA Cherry Hill, also after the old farmstead. 1955 also saw the relocation of South Jersey's largest newspaper, the Courier-Post, to Delaware Township. In 1961, Weber officiated at the opening of the Cherry Hill Mall. It became an immediate town center and another lucrative rateable for the burgeoning township, which needed money to help pay for the mounting services that huge influxes of people want and need. Another boon to the community was the old Garden State racetrack. Although it helped the township financially, it gave Mr. Weber one of the only duties as mayor that he really disliked.
I didn't like people looking for jobs at the racetrack. Every morning when the racetrack was in season, there would be a line of people out in front of the house wanting jobs because they were the best jobs in the town. The racetrack jobs, they were paid the most, and you just couldn't handle it.
In 1963, Weber decided to retire from politics after the tragic death of his daughter and grandchildren in a house fire. Succeeding Mr. Weber was John Gilmour, owner of Holly Ravine Farm. Gilmour was a township commissioner during the Weber administration and no stranger to Cherry Hill politics. He told me that while still a commissioner, he was concerned with the inefficiency of the 5 post offices in the township and began working to change that.
I wanted to get a post office in Delaware Township. Went to Washington on several occasions. Finally, I was told that we couldn't have a post office in Delaware Township while we had the name Delaware in our name. So we had to change the name of Delaware Township to something else. So we put a little ad in the Cherry Hill News. What would the people of this community like to have for a name so we can get a post office? Well, we had all kinds of names. Mauryville, Webertown, and everything else. But finally, the name Cherry Hill came up. And Cherry Hill came to us because of the location of the cherry trees that were up on the hill where Cherry Hill Inn is at the present time. And we selected Cherry Hill by almost a unanimous vote of the people of Cherry Hill. And in 1962, the name was changed from Delaware Township to Cherry Hill. And then it took us about 4 years longer to get the post office, which we have today.
Chronicled in this WFIL TV film about Cherry Hill, the rapid growth begun during the Weber years continued under Gilmour. Now mayor, Gilmour oversaw the construction in the township he envisioned long before while serving as a member of the planning board for Delaware Township.
Cherry Hill neighborhoods maintain their individuality. The people who inhabit these charming houses have not stinted on either beauty or ample lawns and playing.
What major construction projects did you oversee, or what industry, major industry, came into Cherry Hill while you were mayor?
Oh, there were a lot. RCA came in here. We built the mall. We built the mall. I didn't build the mall, but the mall was built while I was here. The industrial park along Springdale Road started its growth. Paul Heiss was very cooperative with the township and did a lot to help the township develop a good, sound industrial park there. We've had, the library was built while I was the mayor. The library started by one of our commissioners, John Pyle, who thought we needed a library long before we even were able to have a building. The first library was in the basement of the police station. And then we grew to having the library in a storefront in Ellisburg Shopping Center. And from there, we had the library, which we have today, which I think is a credit to the community.
According to Gilmour, during his administration, the population quadrupled from 10,000 to over 40,000. Neighborhoods sprouted up everywhere. This apparent success proved to be a double-edged sword for him as he faced his worst attack from the press on the housing issue. It's been a subject that future mayors would have to deal with repeatedly.
One of the things that the press criticized me very strongly for was that I didn't want to have any row houses or condominiums, or as they call them now, or townhouses in the township. My main reason was the fact that the building codes at that time were not stringent enough to put up the kind of buildings which were safe from a fire hazard. I took the reporter from the Cherry Hill News on a trip one day to see some townhouses being built, and showed her how fire hazard they were, how much of a fire hazard they were. And from that time on, I didn't have the criticism, but up until then, I was being criticized very strongly for not having more, what they called at that time, affordable housing.
Gilmour stated he was concerned not only with housing and industry, but with the services the booming population would require. The one thing he said he always wanted for the community was balance.
I was proud of the fact that when I left office over there, we had developed a community which was well balanced. It had a commercial and industrial area which was helping with our tax ratables. We had created a very nice residential areas in most of the sections of the township. While I was the mayor, we had tremendous growth. In 1 year, we had 1,500 brand new houses built in Cherry Hill, all single families. At the same time, we were building schools and we were building churches. I think that I was part of the dedication of 9 different churches, and I think I had part in developing at least 10 different schools.
Today, he remains pragmatic about political life.
One of the things you have to be as a mayor or as a commissioner in a township like Cherry Hill, you have to have broad shoulders and be able to take some criticism. If you can't take the criticism and can't take the heat, you better stay away from the council people and better stay out of politics.
After 20 years of rapid growth, the mood in Cherry Hill began to change. Where there once appeared to be unending vistas of open land, there was now congestion, and the 70s brought a new mindset to the township. John Holden, the Democratic Party-endorsed candidate, was elected mayor and presented a completely new agenda for Cherry Hill, where conservation became a priority.
The first thing we did when we came to office is that we put a halt to wall development. We put a moratorium on any building. We wanted to examine where the community had been, where we are now, and where we wanted to go in the future. We commissioned studies to be done. No one knew where any of the pipes under the township were, for sewage, for drainage, and so forth. That study was done. We wanted to know where the water problems, the drainage problems were in the township, and that study was done. We wanted to study the overall master plan of the township to make sure that we were providing the proper housing and proper development and proper open space for the township. So while that work was done, we were also planning what we could do for the youth in the community and for our senior citizens. And we then started implementing programs to meet those needs.
Lots of families usually mean lots of children, and where farm kids can just look outside their back door for fun and recreation, suburban kids need more structure.
One of the problems were there was not a place for the children to play. And in one area, like tennis courts, there were 4 tennis courts in the township at the time. They were behind West High School. We wanted to build tennis courts in each of the areas of the township, and in order to do that and do it in an inexpensive way as possible, we worked with the school board. They were very cooperative with us and allowed us to build the tennis courts on the school grounds. We built 32 tennis courts. That not only gave the community the opportunity to use those tennis courts when school was not in session, but it gave the school department the opportunity to use tennis courts in their as part of their recreational program. But it saved the taxpayers a great deal of money, not having to buy the land in addition to building the tennis courts.
The need for ratables to help fund services doesn't go away, even though you may have imposed a building moratorium. And Holden found a new and much-needed ratable to help defray costs, one he's very proud of.
There's the property that is opposite the Hyatt House on 38, or the Executive Office campus. We went out and looked for bids for people to build on that property, requiring that they build so many square foot a building a year and develop it over a specific set of time, so that we, number one, would create the jobs, number two, create the ratables.
According to Holden, the downside of the mayoral job for him was always financial.
I guess the most difficult thing I really had to do was to say no when people came to me and wanted things done that I could not do overnight. In other words, I could not correct all the problems of the last 10 years of development overnight. And there were an awful lot of people in town who had real drainage problems that we couldn't possibly attack all at one time. We had people who had a very difficult rainstorm, that water would come into their family room. And in the Kingston area, for instance. And so that was the most difficult thing, I think, is not being able to accomplish all that you would like to accomplish, to help people who had reasonable problems because of money.
During Holden's tenure, it wasn't newer and bigger that counted, but holding on to a little of the township's past that mattered.
We created a conservation commission. Any development within the township that went on had to pass through that conservation commission and make sure that the community was being properly taken care of. As part of that, in upgrading our master plan and providing for housing, we required that all the developers set aside 25% of any land they were developing for open space. In addition to that, we went out and the township purchased 250 acres of land, so that the township would always have some open space for passive or active recreation.
To keep the rapidly disappearing history of the town alive, Holden appropriated the funds to purchase the Barclay farmstead. The condition of the house was deplorable, but those with foresight knew that this was a place worth salvaging, and they were right. The farmstead is a mecca for cultural activities in Cherry Hill and serves to educate all township children about life during the late 18th and early 19th centuries.
We are very, very proud. I think that's the proudest thing of my administration. As I sit here in the Barclay farmstead itself, it makes me feel very good. So that my children, my grandchildren, and all the children in this community in years to come will be able to come here with their families as they grow and enjoy and see what that era brought to the township.
In 1975, John Rocco, a Republican Party-backed candidate, was elected to the town council. He remembers his first election as a very pleasant surprise.
Our initial election, yes, we were absolutely not the favorite to win. The mayor and council that we're in were very popular, and so our victory at that time was rather a surprise. In fact, I'd only been involved in public, even pursuing public life for a 2-month period of time. I was principal, and PTA president asked me to run for council, and 2 months later I was mayor of a town of 70,000 people, so it was an exciting night.
In the early 70s, Cherry Hill underwent an unpopular real estate revaluation. The old axiom about people voting their pocketbooks proved to be no different here, and the Republican-affiliated team won a majority, and Rocco was selected mayor. It's something he remains low-key about.
I think in campaigns, issues rank about 4 or 5. I don't think they're really the primary concern. I think it's how you're perceived by the public, whether they have confidence in you, whether they really believe what you have to say. Because basically all politicians say the same thing, you know, they're all good guys and all good gals and all for the same kinds of things that are going to affect the public. And then it becomes a matter of credibility and whether they believe you or not. As an educator for a good number of years in the township, teaching, throughout the township at Barclay. I taught here in the old Barclay School in the early 60s, and having taught at Woodcrest School and been a principal there and an educator, you really do touch a lot of people's lives, and you work with their children and they get to know you, and it's a deeper understanding than you might get with other politicians. They knew that, the public knew basically that I had a concern for the young people, concern for people in general, and the whole training as with my master's degree was basically in a helping profession. So I think being an educator definitely worked to my benefit, and I think that was a significant part of it.
Involvement in the Cherry Hill School District does place one in a winning arena, with our students garnering accolades in virtually all disciplines. In sports, our athletes have won 21 sectional championships, brought back the gold 72 times in league competition, have chalked up 111 conference wins, grabbed 70 South Jersey titles, and have taken it all back to Cherry Hill, winning state champion titles a total of 40 times. Our thespians consistently win individual awards, and the district routinely places first in the Bucks County Regional One-Act Play competitions. Each year, Cherry Hill has the highest number of placements in honors instrumental and vocal groups, including all South Jersey, all state, and all Eastern orchestras and choral groups. In 1990, we were the only district to place 2 students in the National Honors Orchestra. The chess team has won the state championship 5 years in a row and recently placed 3rd in the national competition. Both high schools have been winners on television's Knowledge Bowl, and both have taken firsts in the American Scholastic Press Contest. Our foreign language scholars have placed 1st and 2nd in national French competitions, and 2 of our students have made it to the International Science Olympiad, where they had to best over 15,000 other entrants just to obtain the honor of participating. We are the only district to have won consecutive mock trial state championships, and last year placed 3rd nationally in that competition. Cherry Hill's SAT grades average 100 points higher than other New Jersey school districts. For more than 10 years, we've had an average of 58 seniors receive district commendation for their academic achievement based on grades and those SAT scores. And for more than a decade, we've averaged 16 National Merit Scholars per year, consistently more than any other district in the state.
Congratulations.
Taxes and the Barclay farmstead, John Holden's pet project, took a front seat during Rocco's administration.
During my tenure as mayor, we were able to cut the tax rate. I think that that's kind of significant in the total picture for the residents of the community in terms of this particular facility, our ability to keep it open, to get it on its kind of journey, since it was a rather new venture for the municipality. We feel very proud about that.
In 1976, Mayor Rocco and his wife Mildred renewed their wedding vows at the farmstead, attended by friends Jim and Joyce Rosa and the Rocco daughters. It was the first of many weddings to be held at the historic home site, which uses the money it gets from these celebrations to help defray operating costs. Rocco also had some duties as mayor that he didn't particularly like.
Yeah, I didn't particularly like the way that we collected the state rebates. We, as the municipality, are the tax collector, so to speak, and we'd have to collect the money, send it to Trenton, and Trenton would then write a check and send it back to the taxpayers. So I always thought that was kind of a long way around, when we could have just as easily returned the money to the taxpayers at the time.
Rocco went on to higher political office, becoming the state assemblyman for the 6th district, the office he still holds today. In the late 70s, the Democratic Party regrouped and backed the New Spirit team. And 3 members from that team, Maria Barnaby Greenwald, Bernard Platt, and Howard Gall, were all to serve as Cherry Hill mayor. As top vote-getter on the team, Maria Greenwald was selected to become the first woman mayor the township ever had.
We were called the New Spirit team, and it was as incredible and unbelievable as that. I know many people spend a lifetime getting ready for government. I was very fortunate.
Mayor Greenwald turned over the mayoral post to a fellow New Spirit team member in 1979 when she opted to run for a higher political office. But her participation in Cherry Hill politics was to become even stronger in the next decade. Bernard Platt, owner of the Platt Funeral Home, was the next council member to assume the job as mayor. And as he told me, he thinks in politics, some things just never change.
We were the new breed of Democrat, so to speak, at that time. And we were running to give the government back to the people and more of a voice for the people in the government. And also that we wanted to keep, it's ironic that we wanted to keep county politics out of Cherry Hill, and the same thing has happened here 10 years later. So.
Platt stated growth of Cherry Hill during his tenure was relatively slow.
It was not tremendous. Cherry Hill, I think the census in 1980 listed Cherry Hill of about 68,000 people or something like that. And the growth was kind of leveled off. It didn't spurt until toward the end of our term, and then it just, busted open.
The Arab oil embargo during the mid-70s made America very aware of our precarious economic position in the world. That international problem, coupled with the local reality of huge numbers of Cherry Hill commuters clogging the roads each day, prompted Platt to rethink the transportation needs and potential solutions to it for the township.
I think the most controversial thing, and the other thing that I'm equally as proud of, is that we did a study on public transportation for the township of Cherry Hill. The one thing that Cherry Hill does not have is a public transportation system. And at that time, gas was approaching $1.50 a gallon or something like that. And everybody was concerned, how are you going to get from this point to this point, and how are you going to move, people. And I fought to have a study done. And that was very, very controversial because there were other members of council who thought it was a waste of time and a waste of money. We even looked into the possibility of having a public transportation system funded by Cherry Hill, and they were against that, but I think that was probably the most controversial.
The idea of a Cherry Hill-funded mass transportation system didn't take hold, so planning to preserve the roads was Platt's next step.
Roads always played a major part in construction in the wintertime when they had to be cleaned from snow. And because of the way Cherry Hill is laid out, and we have highways that belong to the state and highways that belong to the county, and people don't know which are county roads and which are state roads, so they always used to call us and blame us for not clearing those roads. But we did start a 10-year reconstruction program for the roads of the township owned, and that program is in force now, and a lot of the roads are getting resurfaced and rebuilt, which is very important to the infrastructure of the township.
A politician's biggest problem is always money. Getting enough of it to fund services the population needs and expects is an ongoing battle. Hence the ever-vigilant eye on securing new ratables to help with the tax base. But lucrative ratables can literally go up in smoke, as happened in April 1977 when the Garden State racetrack on Route 70 burned. It left Cherry Hill with a deep financial dent.
When we took office, the racetrack, of course, had just been destroyed. And there was controversy about the racetrack and the rebuilding of the racetrack and so forth. That came about, and that was always in the back of our minds, and that was always an issue that continued for the whole time that we were in office. The other thing, Subaru of America, I can honestly say that I played a very important part because I took the call from Marvin Riesenbach, who was the executive vice president of Subaru, and we talked, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I told him we would do everything that we could to bring Subaru to Cherry Hill.
People who walk, jog, or drive along Cooper River Park will notice a piece of sculpture that is a monument commissioned by the Platt administration, one of his proudest efforts as mayor.
Probably the most, one of the greatest things, I think, is the memorial to the victims of the Holocaust, which I spearheaded. And that is one of 6 monuments on public ground in the country. And that represents probably one of the nicest things that we have in Cherry Hill a monument to all of the victims of the Holocaust.
Looking back, how does he think his administration was perceived?
Elected officials, public officials, always feel they get bad press. I do not feel that I ever got real bad press. Personally, I felt that whatever the papers wrote, they wrote, and there was nothing that you were going to do about it because a reporter interprets things differently than you see them. So there's the way you look at it and the way the reporter looks at it and the way she reports it or he reports it, depending upon whether you think they're biased or not.
Howard Gall was the remaining member of the New Spirit team to serve as mayor under the mayor-council form of government. He agrees with Platt that issues in government don't really change, they just get reshuffled.
Those issues that were prevalent 20 years ago, drainage, the monetary money it would take to solve drainage, the CCMUA, the sewerage, bringing treatment plants up, which they must be up to tertiary level, local taxes, local roads, all those items are still the major cause for the increases in budgets and for local people to be concerned about, because the nature of those items are such that there's continuous maintenance that has to be done, and there's a continuous upgrading through our capital improvement projects that require the expenditure of local taxpayers' money. So
Gall told me that municipalities now only control about 25% of their own destiny.
You know, I think there's been a great deal of discussion on home rule, the loss of municipalities to determine their own destinies and fate, because there are those people in state government as well as in county government who believe that certain regionalization is preferable to each municipality acting on their own. One case that we went all the way to the Supreme Court with during the time that I served on council and as mayor was the CCMUA, the regionalization. It came down to we would not join it voluntarily, that a court and Judge Lowengrub had to order us to vote for and to pass the joining of that regionalization.
While Gall was on the township council, Cherry Hill was ordered to regionalize its sewer system and become a member of the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority, or CCMUA. Gall and other council members felt the people of Camden County and Cherry Hill would pay too large a share in comparison with the state and federal governments. Council refused to join. This started a legal battle that was to go on for 12 years. The fight was finally lost in the Supreme Court, but council went on record as saying they had joined the regionalization under duress. Though Cherry Hill is as large as many major cities, Gall feels that it's still the grassroots approach that leads to election, as was the case with the New Spirit team.
A couple years prior to that, however, I think the people were generally satisfied. I think the people that were put together to run on the ticket that time, which was Maria Greenwald and Bernie Platt and Joe Hassman, we were all former Civic Association presidents. We were active within our communities, our synagogues, our churches, and we just worked hard. I think that the four of us, under the leadership at the time, just really went out and wanted it more than the other side had wanted it.
And it was the improvements he could make on the grassroots level that made him proudest.
Revitalizing the Police Athletic League and raising money for them, whether it was creating more parkland through Green Acre funds and partial contribution on behalf of the township so we could land bank ground so that future generations of Cherry Hill would have trees and things. That was important today. Now that you look back and you see how the development keeps moving along, I think that we needed those type of programs.
He described the typical Cherry Hill voter to me.
For the most part, you know, the people are pretty sophisticated, and they're certainly fiercely independent in our township, and they kind of sort out the issues. And one thing that helps a local government like ours is that those people will come to the council meeting, and there's a public participation. And if they have questions that have nothing to do with that night's agenda, they certainly will let you know what's on their mind. And in lots of cases, you can communicate people's fears, regardless of what the issue is, and pretty much satisfy their concerns.
After Gall's term, Cherry Hill was to change to a strong mayor form of government, a transition he was happy to help with.
I was fortunate enough to be the last mayor chosen under the old form of government, which was changed in 1980. Up until that time, all the council people voted on and selected the mayor and deputy mayor. When that change took place, I was the incumbent mayor at the time, and I chose not to run for the full-time mayor. Barnaby Greenwald did, and I ran for council, and our ticket in that 81 election won all 7 council seats, and Maria became the first full-time mayor of Cherry Hill. There was a transition period going from one form of government to another, and during that term, since I had the opportunity to be the mayor at the time, I had a chance to help, you know, structure those ordinances and things so that when we went into the change of form of government, there would be an easy transition period for everybody, because as you know, at that point in time, you distinctly then have an executive form of government and a legislative form of government, with the mayor being obviously the executive side. I like to believe our transition went well. There didn't seem to be too much criticism.
In 1981, Cherry Hill changed from a mayor-council form of government to a strong mayor type. The first full-time mayor the township ever had was, again, Maria Barnaby Greenwald. She found that as a woman, running in her own right was not a problem.
Women vote very conscientiously, too, I will tell you. If you were to look at the voting rolls, you will see in almost every single household, the woman votes. In some of those households, the mothers and daughters outvote the men. And obviously, women outvote men in this community and in this country.
She saw Cherry Hill's emergence into full-time politics as a signal to end being perceived as an appendage to Philadelphia.
People didn't want to be a bedroom community anymore. There's a great spirit of pride in this community. People love their community. They love their high schools. They love their soccer teams. They love Pop Warner. They love Cherry Hill. They spend a lot of money to live here. They invest, probably their single greatest investment is their home. And in Cherry Hill, that investment is very, very large. So when they chose to live here, they don't want to be considered a bedroom community. That was something I also used as an issue. And I said that one thing I would do when I left office, Cherry Hill would never be referred to as a bedroom community again.
The transition was something she felt she and the people were ready for.
As far as working it with the people, it was wonderful, because the people had been looking for that. Under the old form of government, although I was the mayor, I was only one vote of the council. The township manager literally ran the community. That was his function. He hired the department heads and all the people in town hall. The mayor and the council simply acted as ceremonial people and as legislators. And the people didn't want that. The citizens would come to me and want something done, and when we would have to say, well, first we have to put a request into the manager, then we go to council, people would inevitably say to me, Mayor, I elected you. They didn't understand. So once I became the chief executive officer, they felt comfortable with that, because that's how people view their mayor, and that's how it should be.
But as in every job, the downside was never easy.
In some cases, some of the development where you really felt this is going to be too much. This is just, we don't need more of this. But understanding the laws, understanding that the developer had the right to zone, he was already properly zoned. You had no legal way to stop him. And a fight in the courts would have only cost Cherry Hill money, and we would have ended up losing anyway. Some of that development, and I'm not going to specify which, but certainly I would have liked to have seen less of that.
Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you and officially extend to the Subaru Corporation a sincere welcome to our township.
All mayors have pet projects that they hope their administrations will be remembered for, and Mayor Greenwald is no exception.
The thing that I love that I did is I purchased during my administration another area like this, only larger, known as Croft Farm, because there's so little open space. Now, I was deeply chastised for that by my opponents who said she's only doing that because she wants to avoid low-income housing. Absolutely not true. There are many areas for low-income housing. There certainly were more then than there is today. But no, I think we have to preserve our history so that our children understand their past.
Then, like the mythological phoenix, rising from its own ashes, the devastated Garden State track was rebuilt and reopened during Greenwald's tenure.
I was glad to see that the racetrack did not become a state takeover like the Meadowlands, and I fought very hard for that. This community of people would have lost the taxes, we would have lost control. That was a tough battle. We started that battle in '77, and that racetrack was never even built until '81. So that was a hard battle. And it was only under structure in '81. It took a long time.
In 1985, Cherry Hill achieved national recognition for the depth and scope of the drug problem in the community, which prompted still more media coverage.
I didn't always like dealing with the press. I have to tell you, when I first became mayor, I was probably one of the strongest advocates of free press. I really felt journalists, having come through Watergate and so much of that, I really felt that they were the true saviors of this nation. And I have to tell you, there were times during my term as mayor when I knew that wasn't true, that they were looking to sell a story. And if in the meantime they broke Cherry Hill's back by doing it, it didn't really matter. So sometimes dealing with the press, that was a great disappointment to me, because I had thought so highly of the press. And I wanted them sometimes to come out and cover the good things that were happening, the good stories, not Maria Greenwald, but the good things, to help the community, to help the image of our young people, and not just Cherry Hill, every community. I would often say, couldn't you spend equal time with good kids that you would spend with the kids on drugs?
No one did take her up on that offer, but eventually Cherry Hill kids did get national attention again, positive attention for their usual job well done. Maria Greenwald went on to become Freeholder Greenwald, and Cherry Hill again elected another mayor. This all leads us to our current mayor, Susan Bass Levin. Like all our former mayors, she began her public life civically in charitable organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, and her children's schools. And like other mayors, political involvement quickly followed.
In 1985, there was a council race happening, and several friends said to me, "Oh, you should run for office, you should run for office." So I put my name in the hat, so to speak, and I was selected as a council candidate. I ran for office. I was elected.
Who selected you?
The Democratic Party of Cherry Hill Township selected me to be one of 3 council candidates. And the first party meeting, Democratic Party meeting I ever attended was the one I was selected to be the candidate. So it was...
In your very first election, you won.
Right.
Why do you think you won? What issues were at stake? What do you think the voters responded to?
Well, I ran on a ticket with Maria Greenwald, who was running for mayor, re-election as mayor, Denny Dorenzo, and Edgar Wolf. They were also council people. And I think at that time we tried to just present to the voters a group of people that were committed to Cherry Hill Township, cared about the future of the town. For me, I was a young professional, and I think I presented to many people as someone who was willing to give her best for the township. It's always hard to say why you won. You're just happy you won.
Bass Levin ran for and won the mayoral post in 1987, becoming the chief executive officer of a town larger than many United States cities. Although she admits there are problems facing Cherry Hill residents, she feels the benefits of living and working here far outweigh them.
Well, there are certainly benefits. Progress is something that I think people want. And certainly people moved here in the numbers that they did because they saw Cherry Hill as a place that was desirable to live in. Not because it was farms, but because it had good schools and it had good township services and pretty neighborhoods. And I guess success breeds success. The downsides, of course, are that as more people come here, the town becomes more crowded. It takes 25 minutes to get from one side of town to the other in rush hour, and it probably took 5 minutes 10 years ago. So that congestion is certainly a problem that people have to learn to live with. We don't like it, but it's one of the downsides, I suppose, of progress. And when I ran for mayor, we would say as part of our campaign slogan was that Cherry Hill is a great place to live, and we know that. We live here, we chose to live here, but prosperity has brought us certain problems, such as increasing costs to provide services, increasing traffic and congestion, and just in a modern age, the problems of technology. What do you do about all this trash that you accumulate, for example? So sure, there are problems, but I guess as the mayor, I prefer to think of them as challenges rather than problems.
Running a town this size presents plenty of challenges and on a daily basis, but long-term goals must also be addressed.
Well, I think the challenge is to improve the quality of life here. Cherry Hill started out, you said, as a farming community. It then became a bedroom community. People lived here, and then they left to go to work, for example, or to go to school, and then they came back home to their suburban house. But it's a town without any town center, without, oftentimes perhaps without a distinctive personality. And so I think what you've seen over the past few years, and hopefully what you'll see in the future, is the town start to develop a personality, start to, perhaps even separate from that, to improve the quality of life here so that it's more than commuting, it's more than a place where you sleep. And how do you do that? Well, you develop your park system. You look to ways to beautify the town. You look to bring culture and arts into the town. You recognize the historical significance of the land you live on. You don't always look to go to Philadelphia or New York for something special, but that there can be special things right in this community.
The challenge of better use of our parklands is being met by the Bass Levin administration by making the land we have now more usable for a larger amount of people. An example of that is the playground equipment now situated at the Barkley Farmstead. Its purpose is to get 20th century families with young children to the historic sites so they may become aware of our town's history earlier and become more frequent users of Barkley's 18th and 19th century attractions. The Croft Farmstead, located on the west side of town, represents the mayor's hope for a cultural center for Cherry Hill. Unfortunately, this rare historic town site may never be allowed to achieve that goal.
In 1984, the township purchased a large farm called the Croft Farm. It's 80 acres of open space on the corner of Brace Road and Crescent Roads in Cherry Hill. Unfortunately, the township was immediately sued after it purchased the land. I was not yet involved in government, but the people suing said that the town bought that piece of land in order to circumvent what's called the Mount Laurel decision, an obligation to provide housing for people of low and moderate income. The property's been tied up in litigation since 1984. However, we're hopeful that it will soon be resolved. And the reason I say all this is that I think the Croft Farm can be a recreational, cultural town center rather than a strip of stores, rather than a town center like Haddonfield has where you shop, but rather perhaps a building where we can enjoy arts performances. There's a historic farmstead on the site that we're restoring now. There's land for athletic fields, for walking paths, for bicycle fields. So I think it has the potential for being a town center in the very best sense of the word.
Though open land is now virtually non-existent here, a new phenomenon is occurring in Cherry Hill, that of suburban redevelopment, changing the old suburban landscape to a cityscape. It's a new wrinkle that Bass Levin and those in her administration keep a close eye on.
I think that there's some compromise there. I would not like to see a skyscraper community. However, there are certain parts of town with very old commercial buildings that I think could be better used if they were redeveloped. And I think that that's really the beauty of Cherry Hill, and that is its vitality. You're going to see over the course of the next 5 years some of the older commercial properties changing in character. And the perfect example is Sinelli's restaurant on Route 38. It was a landmark. Everybody knew Sinelli's. Well, Rouse Corporation bought it, tore it down. The company had gone bankrupt. And now you have a beautiful office building called the Tri-Point Building that really will be a focal point for commercial development in that part of town. So I think that that whole movement towards redevelopment, towards better using the land and making it more beneficial for the community is something that we'll see over the next 5 years.
Mayor Bass Levin took a bold stand when first elected. She raised taxes to cover a budget deficit. That decision had the usual effect that tax hikes have on any electorate, and it caused the spirited debate that Cherry Hill voters are known for when faced with an issue they care deeply about. But it's a trait Bass Levin respects.
They care a lot about their town. And they're eager to express opinions, which is great because you get a lot of information. However, they're also eager to express their opinions when they disagree. So that there have certainly been tumultuous times during my tenure, particularly in the beginning. We got off to somewhat of a rocky start. But I think that had you asked me this question a year ago, I probably would have given you a different answer. It's no secret that I had a public hearing on a budget 2 months into office that 1,600 people attended. But I think that that has died down, and I've done a lot of work with citizen groups. Almost everything I do, I try and get consensus. And even if it starts out rocky, the best way to getting something done is having a lot of people work with you to do it. So I have town meetings once a month in every neighborhood. Once a month in each neighborhood, I go and I talk to people. I have resident groups that work with me on parks, on issues of concern. So while it has its ups and downs, I think on balance what I've found is that the people in this town care about the town and want to play a role in what happens, and that's good for everybody.
Determining what solutions or tactics are good for the greatest amount of people in the township and the township itself consumes every part of the mayor's day, whether making those decisions alone or with the support of other township officials.
I guess the best part of the day is when you're able to respond to something that people want and you're able to meet the challenge head on so that you feel a sense of accomplishment. The worst part of the day, well, I suppose the worst part is you can never do everything. And there's a sense that you really would like to be able to do everything all at once. And that's not practical, but it can be frustrating at times.
After talking to the mayors, I started to wonder just what makes local politics work. How do we, the voting public, take merely civic-minded people, friends and neighbors who start out running a few committees or running a neighborhood organization, vote them into decision-making positions of power, and have it, for the most part, turn out so well? I did get an answer which seemed quite simplistic at first, but probably isn't. Mayor Howard Gall.
I think they were all good people. I don't think there's ever been a major scandal in Cherry Hill that I recall, and I've lived here 22 years. They were just good people who, on a local level, philosophically, there wasn't really a political party type of mentality. The people I served with genuinely wanted to do what was best for the township. And I think when that attitude permeates over the years, I think one administration may want to take credit over another administration, but in reality, it's a combination of a long period, many decades of good, decent government that has led Cherry Hill to be certainly one of the leading municipalities in the state, and I believe the leading municipality in South Jersey.